Welcome to the Rotoworld Basketball Show. It has been quite some time, but we are back in action. I am Vaughn Dalzell, Dan Titus of Yahoo Sports, and Raphielle Johnson of NBC Sports. Join me as always. And last time we talked, gentlemen, Sixers and Knicks were in a dead heated battle. Only one of those teams have survived. The Magic were also in a long series. They did not survive. And the West has been pretty complicated since then. A lot of lengthy series. So a lot to talk about today, including draft lottery. If you're a Chicago Bulls fan, you are absolutely livid. Atlanta Hawks, you're happy. And then coaching as well. So, Raphael, without further ado, what is up and what is biggest on your mind over the last 2 weeks since we last talked? What's going
on? Well, based on the hat, I think we know what the answer is. Yeah, big win for the Knicks last night. I think the rest that they got at the end of game 4, with that game being a blowout, really benefited them because they're playing every other day since the start of that series. Now game 6 isn't until Friday because Thursday night is Caitlin Clark's home debut for the Indiana Fever, so they won't have the arena available for that one. So Knicks don't have too many bodies at this point, but what they do have has been really good, and hopefully they can close it out on Friday.
Yeah, it was certainly this series Knicks are in right now is one that we're going to talk about, and I have loved every bit of Knicks versus Pacers. Think it may be the most entertaining series, probably outside of Nuggets and Wolves. But Dan, I don't know if you have any opinion because we know that you have long since moved on from your team. So who are you rooting for now, and what really intrigues you the most in the NBA playoffs?
Yeah, clearly I'm on to the Phillies now. Got some divisional futures out there. But, respect to the New York Knicks. And I actually texted Raph, I think actually it was like, game 2? Yeah. And I was like, I'm quietly supporting the Knicks here on out because I hate the Boston Celtics. But I also just appreciate how much the Knicks brand of basketball is just like a throwback version of 90s basketball, like the hustle that they get and everyone knowing their role. Everyone just rallying around Jalen Brunson and what he continues to do is just insane. Dante DiVincenzo, just the ascension of him in this postseason has just been great to see. It's just a fun team to back, man. And we'll talk about it in a little bit, but I've been very happy with the Knicks getting back into the playoffs because I think it's been making the playoffs that much more entertaining when you have the MSG crowd and everything kind of rounding around. We've missed you, man. It's been 15, 20 years?
10 years, yeah.
Well, we never really considered the mellow years actually a viable opportunity to actually win anything. But this has been good. This has been good.
Yeah, and we're at that position now where people are starting to talk, can Jalen Brunson lead a championship team? You brought up the Carmelo years, Dan, and that's interesting because, are the Knicks surpassed that? Raphael, are they in a position where you think they can win a championship? Because right now, this year, I would say the odds are stacked against them with the stint of a roster they have. I mean, Josh Hart, kudos to that man. He's playing 46 to 48 minutes per game. So, if you do not believe in this year, you think moving forward, the Knicks are a championship contender?
I think they are just because they have clear leadership. We talk about Jalen Brunson, obviously for the sake of this podcast being fantasy based, he's going to be the main name, but it all started when they hired Leon Rose as team president. At that point, they're no longer employing yes men, to bow down to James Dolan's every demand. And then they hired Tom Thibodeau as the head coach. So it's you get that strong leadership, let them do their jobs. And this is kind of what happens. I think whether it's the Knicks or the Pacers who advance to the conference finals, it'll be interesting to see how that team approaches the offseason because on one point, it's we got to the conference finals, but I think one of the worst things you can do is to look at that and use that as a reason to only make minor changes. I'm not saying they have to take a home run swing in either free agency or via the trade market, but you also have to be honest about assessing your team and what you could potentially be as a championship contender. So I think for both teams, that's going to be interesting to look at because if the Pacers advance, even though it's not their fault that anybody got hurt, but they knocked off 2 teams that were shorthanded. So I think that's going to be a part of the conversation for them if they go to the conference finals. The Knicks, it can't just be about, Julius Randle being healthy, Mitchell Robinson being healthy. They both had injury issues the last couple of years. Isaiah Hartenstein is going to be a free agent. So they're going to have some significant questions to answer. But right now, it's a fun time to watch these teams compete.
Yeah, and the makeover they also had, sending RJ Barrett and Manuel quickly to Toronto too. And getting to this point now has certainly been all that made it all that more interesting. So let me ask you this, Raphael, before I get to Dan. Is Julius Randle safe? Will he be in New York Knicks after the trade deadline next season?
It's a good question. I think in terms of the fit, and obviously it's unfair to him because he's been out injured. It's not like he's refusing to play, but he's probably the one person you look at and say, could we potentially get some value back via trade? And I think that may be something they have to address, because with Mitchell Robinson's medical history, I think they have to do a lot to keep Isaiah Hartenstein. Now, he's probably played to a point where it may become too expensive to hold on to him, but they really have to try to make that happen just because of how important he's been, even as a backup. So I think, will he command starting center money? I don't know if we're talking elite starting center, but I think the price, hey, the price of the brick is going up, so that's all I can really say.
Yeah, that's true. And he had arguably his best game on the boards in the playoffs in the Game 5 win. That's Hartenstein.
Yeah.
He had 17 rebounds. Just a
12
7-point.
offensive.
He took a little bit of a Josh Hart role. I'm a little upset about it. Josh Hart over 12 rebounds last leg of the parlay, and Hartenstein just went absolute bonkers, but it's okay. Jalen Brunson, though, cashed out for me. 44 points after 3 games of 29, 26, and 18. Dan, everybody was talking about his foot. Mike Breen said one of the best things I ever heard on television. He said, "What is Jalen Brunson's foot gonna do?" It's like that's a great question. But it was all right. His foot was balling. 44 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds. What do you make of his effort? And do you think the Knicks advance in this series?
I think that the Knicks will advance. As Raph stated, I think it's the way that the schedule is. It lends itself for another day for them to continue to rest. We know they're going to play heavy minutes, but I think if we're going into it, I feel like Deuce McBride, inserting him back into the starting lineup was like the shift. And every time Deuce McBride starts, he produces 17 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists in the regular season. He's that spark that I think that they needed. That offense got a little bit stagnant because, Brunson was hurt, but now that you have that little baked-in schedule, day of rest there, I don't know that the Pacers, that we've seen enough consistently from Pascal Siakam. Tyrese Haliburton's been, reverting back to what he looked like in game 1, passive, not really finding a flow in the game. I think the Knicks might have taken their soul out of that last blowout in game 5. So, I'm looking towards the Knicks to take care of business here and then potentially go up against the Boston Celtics. I know they're going to be facing against the Cleveland Cavaliers tonight, but Donovan Mitchell's not playing again, so that series is pretty much a wrap.
Yeah. All Boston fans have said I want Indiana, and I can see why. And after a 30-point blowout, Dan, I'll say Indiana's hopes are not over, but they are definitely looking grim. And before we move on from the topic, you said something about Haliburton reverting back. 13 points on 5 of 9 shooting, didn't get that many attempts up. Raphael, what are the keys to the New York Knicks securing Game 6 victory and advancing? And if they win and advance to the Boston Celtics, what is that series winner? What's the Celtics in 6? What do you got?
Yeah, I think the key is going to be Haliburton. We saw him in games 3 and 4. He's highly aggressive in terms of hunting his shot. And when he's doing that, they're extremely difficult to defend. But you got Deuce McBride out there, as Dan stated. He can get up into him defensively, and he gives the Knicks another ball handler to combat that 94 feet of pressure that the Pacers like to bring to the table. So I think the Knicks get it done. In honor of John Starks, go ahead and shut it down in Indianapolis on Friday. As for the conference finals, I think that's going to be difficult. It's interesting. Like the Celtics, they've clearly been the class of the Eastern Conference this year, and NBA in general, but they have these moments late in games where they just revert to ISO ball, and it's almost like, for whatever, I don't know what they're trying to prove when they do that, but it's like that's a situation where whoever advances can potentially steal a game just because they don't really focus offensively and keep the ball movement, the player movement going. So I think Boston's going to end up in the NBA Finals anyway. I'd say probably Celtics in 6, regardless who they get. in the next round.
Yeah, I like to hear that. And I think that the Knicks will steal more than one game. The Celtics are known for playing with their food in the playoffs. We've seen it notoriously again this postseason. So there's no way of thinking New York, a team playing this hard, so much defense, and also as scrappy as they can be, will not win at least one game. I think they get 2 games for sure in that series. But the West has been all that more interesting because Boston has rolled, but Denver, they have not. They were down 0-2, Dan. Now they're up 3-2. Nikola Jokic has been absolutely amazing. Anthony Edwards was up until last game where they kind of found a way to defensively play against him. What were your thoughts on that in heading into Game 6? Who do you like and what do you like?
Oh man, this is an interesting series because I think a lot of people thought that the Nuggets were down and out. I had faith in them. Because like honestly, at this point, it was like they just needed to. They didn't really see the Lakers as viable opponent. Like they were kind of cruising through that. So I think they got the wake up call when Ant showed up and gave him 40, and then they just got dismantled the second game of the series. And then I think it was like, all right, Nikola Jokic time. I think that they've been getting exceptional minutes out of Christian Brown. I think Michael Malone giving him 25 minutes in the last 2 games has really changed the tempo. Aaron Gordon has just been outstanding all series long. He's kind of replaced Michael Porter Jr. as that like other cog of the role players that need to step up. But yeah, Nikola Jokic, there's not much you can really say, dude. Like this is your 3-time MVP showing out right now. Like the way that he was abusing anyone who was in his way, Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid, it just didn't matter, man. His touch, anytime there was any doubles pointed his way, like he's throwing these great dimes, he's throwing full court passes like a quarterback. Like the dude's just in his bag right now. And like when he's playing like that, no one's going to beat the Nuggets. So if you got a Nuggets future, you got to be feeling pretty good about this. Like I don't think the Minnesota is going to be able to come back from that. And as much as confidence Anthony Edwards has, the fact that he's just laughing at the fact that Jokic is that good, there's nothing you can do about it. Like he knows, everyone knows, like if he's playing like that, like you can't, they're on a different level. So I think eventually we're going to get to see what everyone probably presumed in the beginning of the season, Boston Celtics, Denver Nuggets on the other side. Let's see the 2 best teams of basketball go at it.
Yeah, that's certainly where I've had my money for the last few months, and I just put it on today, that exact matchup, Celtics and Nuggets, because I've been a believer. I just need to see the Nuggets win a few games to kind of get their confidence back. And now once they won Game 3, I definitely feel like they were the right side in Game 4, and now it's just Nuggets clearly should be the favorites in the NBA Finals, but that's probably a hot take since the Celtics have ruled everybody but the injury concerns. So I asked Raphielle the same question. He's a big man, so I think I know what his answer is going to be. Dan, should Jokic have won MVP or should have been SGA or somebody else?
I feel like I see the argument for SGA, but like I just think that I think the media and the general public are just underrating how valuable Nikola Jokic is. Like he's the best player on the planet. And if that wasn't evidence enough, like he does this though every season though. Like that's the thing. Like the numbers are there. If you look at EPM and all the advanced data, he's the leader. He's number 1 dude. And SGA's ascension has been great. They were the number 1 team in the Western Conference, but it's not like Denver was that far behind them, right? So I think Nikola Jokic deserved the award. I'm not mad at him winning it. And he should have won. He could have won last year too. Yeah. Not me being a Philly homer. Like he had the numbers to compete with Joel Embiid for it. So I have no problem in getting the award.
Yeah, certainly. I think that Nikola Jokic definitely makes his teammates better. I mean, you said Aaron Gordon. This guy's putting up the numbers that Chet Holmgren wishes he was putting up in the playoffs right now. But Raphielle, how about you? Who was your MVP this season?
It was Jokic. I think, look, Oklahoma City was the 1 seed in the West based on head-to-head tiebreaker. It wasn't like, they won the division by 3 or 4 games, So, yeah, I had no problem with it. Like Dan said, it could be 4 MVPs in a row for Jokic. He's been that good for an extended period of time. I'm just surprised that so many people were eager to kind of shovel dirt on the Nuggets after they lost those first 2 games. Like I know wasn't looking great going on the road down 0-2, but I feel like champions deserve a little more respect than that. And it's almost like champions have like this old man strength where, they're going to take it to another level. Like you kind of think you're doing something and you're fighting your pop, you're like wrestling with your pops or something. Then you wind up getting pinned on your back. And I think that's what we're seeing happen here in this series. I think the big question for me about game 6 is Mike Conley. Now, if he's available, I think that changes things, especially for Anthony Edwards. He had 9 assists in game 5, but also 4 turnovers. I want him to be always in attack mode instead of having to worry about sometimes facilitating. So if they can get Conley back, I think that really helps Minnesota immensely in terms of what they need to do offensively. But they don't have an answer for Jokic, and I think that's going to be the deciding factor. Like, we don't need to see Kyle Anderson attempting to guard Nikola Jokic. Like,
Please.
That I know Cat had some success in the first 2 games, but I think we need to be honest about that too. So Gobert did his best, just wasn't good enough. Like this man, he's a generational player, and I think it's people need to not be afraid to admit this.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely agreed. I mean, Rudy Gobert. I hope he enjoyed his last Defensive Player of the Year award. But certainly, if he can't stop Jokic, not many players will.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't mean to say that like he's not going to be one of the best defensive players, but Victor Wembanyama is
Wemby.
So it's pretty much his award for the next 5 seasons. Which someone asked me the other day, they were looking to get into investing, and they said, "Do you know any companies worth investing?" And I said, "Victor Wembanyama." They said, "What?" Yeah, Defensive Player of the Year. Let's just wait till that opens up. But yeah, I think that there's no way of stopping Nikola Jokic, and it's past time. And if they get matched up with the Celtics, depending on Porzingis' health, Uncle Al Horford, watch out. You're gonna need a couple extra breakfasts and dinners hanging out with Nikola Jokic. But let's talk Dallas, Oklahoma City, because that series to me continues to go back and forth. We see a takeover from SGA. We see Luka have big games. Kyrie Irving getting the assist game going, not scoring very much. Raphielle, what are you looking at in this series? And who has impressed you the most or disappointed you the most?
Yeah, SGA's fourth quarter was just an absolute masterclass in game 4. So I think he would be the impressive guy. PJ Washington on the other side. I think the disappointment would have to be Luka Doncic. I know he isn't healthy, and that's still going to be an issue tonight, but he hasn't been efficient. You give Oklahoma City some credit for that defensively, but also, look, he's always been a guy kind of get on the refs and kind of ride them throughout the game, but it's
Thank you.
It's gone beyond that point in this series. Maybe the injury has something to do with that, but it's like, man, you just got to play. I think, he needs to be better. I'd like to see a full 48 from Kyrie in terms of his production. Like, he's been much better in the second half than the first half of these games. And I think with Luka's issues health-wise, they can't afford to have that happen tonight in game 5. So I think you see more from Kyrie, but in terms of disappointment, I would have to go Luka Doncic there.
Yeah, I'm glad someone said something about the complaining. As a prop better and everything, I need him to get 12 rebounds the last game, which he did. But for 7-8 straight minutes, I was yelling, "Stop talking to the refs, get a rebound." But yeah, every single thing that wasn't called was certainly a problem for him. So you question if his head was in the game, then he misses a free throw with less than 15 seconds remaining. That really put the nail in the coffin there for his team. But Dan, as Raphielle said, PJ Washington definitely stepped up. Is he potentially your most impressive player in the series? And is Luka Doncic also your most disappointing? Or are you looking elsewhere?
Most impressive thus far, I would probably say, I would say the unexpected play of PJ Washington. But I think it's also, as we're watching PJ Washington go off, it's Kyrie Irving getting a lot of those assists. But I feel like if they're going to win this series, Kyrie needs to give you 20, 25 points. It can't be these two. I think he's had 2 games under 10 points. Like that the way Luka's playing hurt, it's great that you're getting that other additional scorer from PJ Washington, but like that, they need Kyrie to go off at this point. So if he doesn't, they're going to lose. And I have the Thunder winning this series. I think it's the injuries are just mounting too much for Luka. He can't play this hero ball and be sustainable. I mean, I know you guys probably have alerts on, but like Daniel Gafford's in the locker room like every freaking play at this point. Who knows if he's going to be able to stand up? He's been playing really well. But I don't know. I think that the Thunder are just going to best them. And the way that we kind of saw them lose that game, that was the series for me. They had to win that game, go up, 3-1 in the series to tie this up at 2-2 going back to the Thunder tonight. I think the momentum's with the Thunder, and I think they're going to find a way to get it done.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I cannot wait to watch that game. I'm hoping for the Thunder's sake, Chet Holmgren has a big game. He's been a guy that we've talked about all season, but he hasn't quite had this any impact in the series that I thought he was going to have, but it has been the SGA show, as Raphael alluded to, especially late in games, so I can appreciate that. Before we move on to the coaching hires, the NBA draft, and some fantasy talk, I wanted, Raphael, you wanted to note something here before we talk about our.
No, I was going to wait till after. Yeah, I was going to wait till after.
Okay, so Boston and Cleveland. We don't have to spend much time on this because this series likely is over tonight.
My bad.
Now you want to go?
Because I thought we were going to go promo read first. That's why I said wait till after that. But I'm starting to wonder if Oklahoma City is going to entertain trading Josh Giddey this summer.
Hey, because we already talked about this, right?
Yeah, we've discussed it before, and he's still starting, but he's playing about 13 minutes per game because you can't have two non-shooters out on that floor. And given what Lou Dort gives them defensively, it's quite clear that he's going to stay out there. We've seen Isaiah Joe, we've seen Aaron Wiggins, Case and Wallace. We've seen all these guys play more rotation minutes than Giddey. And I think regardless of how far Oklahoma City goes in these playoffs, that's the position I think you have to look at in terms of making a significant upgrade because he needs the ball in his hands, but he can't shoot too well. And you have SGA who needs the ball in his hands. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to give the ball to the MVP runner-up over Josh Giddey, not 10 times out of 10. So just want to note
defensively
that.
Too. Like he's not playable in the second half. Like even though he's getting those starters, like second half, Aaron Wiggins is out there, Kason Wallace. He's definitely got to be gone. And I think that that's the right move for the future of Oklahoma City. But it's interesting how we call that being a thing well before this even happened, right? Like we saw it one time. It's like I think that this is probably gonna hold here. And he's the further they go along, I think he's gonna play less and less. And I think it's great that Kason Wallace is getting these critical playoff minutes as well as Aaron Wiggins, someone that I didn't think would crack the rotation in the playoffs, but that just goes to show how much they don't favor Giddey in these pressure situations.
Yeah, once Wallace hit his second three-pointer the fourth quarter in the previous game, I was like, Josh Giddey may not see more than 10 minutes next game. But that's really where they're at. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Raphael. He's absolutely going to be a trade asset, someone they need, a position they need to improve on next year. And I don't think Dan, myself, or our producer Adam in the background is going to disagree with that. So briefly for Boston, Cleveland, before we move on, who is the most important player moving forward for the Boston Celtics outside of Tatum or Brown? Raphael, I'll start with you.
I think you mentioned him earlier, Kristaps Porzingis. His health, it may not be a major issue for the conference finals or even the remainder of this series, but they get Denver in the NBA finals. Both teams get that far. They're going to need all hands on deck in the post. Porzingis can bring a different kind of a style of big on the offensive end. So his ability to shoot threes, moves pretty well, the good pick and pop game with whoever is handling the basketball. So I think his health's going to be key for them. But like I said earlier, it's also about their mindset. If they don't settle offensively for the one-on-one, basketball in crunch time, I think they can win a championship. But when they do that, that's when they get in trouble.
Yeah, the Celtics one of the lowest scoring fourth quarter teams in the playoffs so far too. They don't play like they care very much when they're up in the games, and they've been letting teams creep back in here or there. But I agree, Porzingis is very important. I would go a different route, but Dan, I'm curious to hear who you're going to say as the most important player for the Celtics moving forward.
I think it probably is Kristaps Porzingis, but I'll throw a sidebar in there. I think it might be Drew Holiday because I feel like he's going to have his hands full in either, no matter which way this goes. Like you either got to check Brunson, which is going to be that's cutting off the head of the snake, right? If he can check him as well as Derek White, I'm sure he's going to have his share of opportunities guarding Brunson as well. or Haliburton, whoever gets to that conference finals. But then when you go to the Western if you go to the Western Conference, like you're going to have Jamal Murray and all those potentially OKC or Luka Doncic to guard. So like, I feel like Jrue Holiday is going to have, this is where he makes his money right here. And like, I know from a fantasy perspective, we'll talk about it a little bit later, he was pretty much a disappointment this year, but like, this is why you go out and get a battle tested champion who can guard multiple positions and is like a lockdown defender. He's going to be crucial for these next two series coming up.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say too, because you may not have thought that in the Miami series, averaging 8 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Definitely not knocking your socks off, as they would say. And then against Cleveland, the last 2 games, I'm like eye-opening. We're at the point where he's averaging 18 points or 17 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 5 assists. So you've seen him starting to shoot better now, get his shot back, his confidence back, and I think that's going to go into the next series. And facing Raphielle's Knicks, most likely, Jalen Brunson is definitely going to keep his hands full. So, and with Josh Hart as well, he's going to have to help out rebounding a little more. Maybe Derek White, that he's a little younger than Jrue Holiday. Josh Hart got a lot of energy out there, Raphielle. But if you guys didn't know, the second leg of the Triple Crown will be run on this Saturday. You can watch the Preakness Stakes at the Pimlico Racecourse. The action starts at 4:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. And I want to double back on something I said earlier in the show about the NBA draft lottery. The Atlanta Hawks had a 3% chance to cash the number 1 overall pick. They did that. The Chicago Bulls had had 2% chance to get it. So I, for one, am not a huge fan of how the lottery is run because the Detroit Pistons probably are not either, landing the 5th pick. Raphielle.
When tanking goes wrong.
Yeah, that's what I'm just like. I mean, and that's an argument that you can make, because if you're going to tank, then this could happen to you. Mm-hmm. And that's going to say, don't tank, be competitive, because even if you do still suck, you could be the number 1 team. But at the same time, I thought the Pistons should be securely a top 3 overall pick, Raphielle, but they end up at 5. What are your thoughts on the NBA draft lottery in general? And do you think that what do the Hawks do with the number 1 overall pick?
I don't mind it. I like the fact that they changed the odds so that you aren't as explicitly rewarded for pulling the plug as you were in years past. So I'm fine with it. And plus, if you're trying to rebuild, you need to establish a winning culture. And I don't understand how tanking and putting players in positions where they really can't succeed helps your bottom line. Like, you can say, well, most of these guys won't be here when we get successful, but how do you know that you'll be successful? Like, the Pistons have been down for a decade now. So it's like, okay, so what are you really doing this for? As for the Hawks, I think this makes an already interesting summer even more so, because now you have that 1st overall pick. I don't agree with the idea that this is a weak draft. I just think there really isn't like a bona fide superstar that we can identify right away. I think there's going to be good value in this draft. 1st overall pick, they've got a lot of different places they can go here, but they also need to figure out what they're going to do with Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. Do you move one? Do you move both? Clint Capella, you've already re-signed Onyeka Okongwu. Capella's going into a contract year. Maybe you move him to a playoff contender for future draft capital or something like that. You do that, that could clear the area for someone like an Alex Sarr. Physically kind of measures out favorably to a Tyson Chandler. I think his game's a little bit more versatile than Chandler's was when he was entering the NBA, but you're talking about a legit 7-footer, good athleticism, can play the 4 or the 5. Onyeka Okongwu is also an athletic big who can play multiple positions in the front court. Maybe you start there in terms of a rebuild, but because what the Hawks have been doing, it can't go on any longer. It's like what we said about conference finalists, in terms of like if the Pacers or Knicks get there, you can't look at it and say, well, we made it to the conference finals. We only have to do a few little things, because I think the Hawks took that approach after their run a couple seasons back, and we see where that's gotten them.
Yeah, no, I agree. You remember last year's second half of the season from the Atlanta Hawks. They were one of the better teams to go into the playoffs, kind of get Boston a little run for the money out the gate. And then they come out this year and have pretty much been flat the entire season. So I agree with you that DeJounte Murray and Trae Young, that experiment needs separated. You can get something for Murray. Clint Capella, there's many pieces in this draft as a big man. So Clint Capella is a guy that's very movable too. Dan, what would you add on what Atlanta should do in this offseason? And do you love or hate the NBA draft lottery? Sixers not really in it very often, so it's been quite a while, right?
Yeah, no, man, I feel like they're the kings of having like a 15 through 22 type pick, which it comes with its own problems. But I think I'm okay with the draft lottery. There's always something that can be improved, but I think that there was nice to see some parity of like the number one tanking team not being rewarded with a number one pick. I think it's pretty interesting that Atlanta got their first overall pick ever in their franchise history. So this should be fun. What should they do? They should trade Trae Young. I think he's going to net the most value on the trade market. I think they should also trade Clint Capella for many of the reasons that Raph just stated. And I think that would clear the decks enough to rebuild around DeJounte Murray. Bogdan Bogdanovic is still under contract. They still are paying DeAndre Hunter an insane amount of money, like $20 million a year. I think you're probably pretty much stuck with that at this point. So I think drafting Alex Sarr, like he looks like the best prospect so far. Like there are certainly several players that are really young that could develop into, rotational role or potential, all-star type potential. Like I really like Dillingham, but I don't think that would be a good fit for them right now. Like I think Alex Sarr gives them the versatility to have a big man that can guard multiple positions. I mean, he's a freak athlete. And I saw some videos of him shooting. Looks like he's improving there a little bit. I don't expect that to be like a trademark of his game or anything like that. But if you trade Capella, you get a big man to pair with DeJounte Murray. You already have the shooters around there. I think it could be an interesting rebuild situation there. And I think Landry Fields is a pretty good GM, pretty smart dude. Obviously, they weren't expecting to get the number one pick, but I think that anything's on the table at this point now that they have, a pretty nice, sizable asset right now in that number one pick. So there's also a possibility that they trade the pick, maybe, but I would be surprised if they did.
Did not know Landry Fields was the GM there. That is pretty interesting. There's a lot of NBA players from, our childhoods or, early college years that are now getting their chance in the NBA. So that's pretty cool to see that and hear that. But, yeah, I agree. I think DeJounte Murray, Trae Young, Clint Capella, as we mentioned, all three of those guys going to be also all in trade block. And draft night certainly could be done. We've already seen rumors that DeJounte Murray, San Antonio, we should say, wants DeJounte Murray back. And the Spurs also have the number 4 and 8 overall pick. So 2 top 8 picks for the Spurs. Will be interesting to see, too, what they do there. One of the most intriguing off seasons moving forward will probably be with the Phoenix Suns. We talked about them. They were going to get swept. I was the only one on this podcast saying I think that they could do something still. Their season may not be over. Their season was definitely – I'm going to Cancun on Saturday morning. I might see Kevin Durant there. But they got a new head coach. They're probably going to move the roster around. Raphielle, what is your mindset with the Phoenix Suns moving forward? What's their fantasy value for next season? And is there any right now because we just don't know which direction they're headed?
Yeah, they hired Mike Budenholzer, obviously another head coach with championship experience. I kind of wondered if James Jones was going to get run out of there as a GM because, I mean, he's the one who put together a roster without a functional point guard. And until they address that situation, I don't really think too much is going to change. Now, you can say, well, Bradley Beal, if he can stay healthy, when's he stayed healthy? It's like Daniel Gafford with his frequent trips to the locker room. Bradley Beal has struggled to reach 60 games on a consistent basis. So you got that. You got Kevin Durant, who's got more days behind him than ahead of him with regard to his NBA career. Devin Booker, you've got 3 stars. They re-signed Grayson Allen. They don't have too much money to make significant changes. So I'm not sure what they have in terms of draft picks, but they're going to need to address that point guard situation probably via trade. I just don't know who they're going to be able to move.
What do you like about that deal or about the signing, Dan, or do you like it at all? And do you agree with Raphielle on what they may do this offseason?
So it's interesting because I think a lot of people are talking about the shortcomings of Frank Vogel in terms of his offensive strategy. But like it was kind of hard for him to even put the strategy together when 1/3 of the big 3 is out for a significant portion of the season. And I think it's reached a point now where They don't have a lot of draft capital to play with. Raph just mentioned they re-signed Grayson Allen. At this point, I feel like if you're going to, you can't run this back and be successful. So I'm thinking that so the Phoenix has the 22nd pick in the draft. So it's an asset, right? I feel like it's going to be packaged with, I don't know. I think they're going to end up having to trade one of the big three. And since Bradley Beal has a no trade clause, like the worst deal ever next to Tobias Harris's 5-year deal for $180 million or whatever he stole from the Pacers. So that means you have to trade Kevin Durant. Like, you're not going to trade Devin Booker. So
yeah,
I don't know. Kevin Durant's been a mercenary. We know that he doesn't care which team he plays for as long as he has some kind of running mate or a chance to succeed. And he's run for the hills before. Brooklyn didn't work out. He was out. Phoenix didn't work out. I'm guessing he's going to leave again. And I don't know. There were some rumors. I think we talked about it briefly, but, I saw some Vince Goodwill and Tom Haberstroh were talking about potentially Durant going back to the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think it'd actually be interesting, like slot him in there to where Josh Giddey was.
Yeah,
man, look out for that. Like that would be pretty tough. But they have some problems at hand here. And Coach Bud is a good hire. Like, as much as he's known as an offensive mind, 7 of the 10 seasons he's been a head coach, his team is ranked in the top 10 in defensive efficiency. So, I mean, he can coach his ass off, but I don't know if he's going to have the personnel to really get this team over the hump to beat. I don't know. They're not even going to be able to beat the Thunder. They can't beat the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're not going to be able to beat the Nuggets. So, you're just pretty much playing on borrowed time right now. You got to make a move if you're really trying to change the trajectory of this franchise.
We are getting old when we're talking about Kevin Durant going back to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Or if you caught LeBron James courtside for the Cavaliers game a few nights ago, days after, Bronny posts a picture of Happy Mother's Day in Ohio State jersey after people were saying he may not get drafted. So, yeah, I mean, hey, if you guys are going to retire soon, just give us Cavs versus Thunder, Durant versus LeBron, just like old times real quick. And then we can move on with the next generation, the Ant Edwards of the world. But speaking on another team, let's go to the Lakers because the Lakers, much like the Suns, are going to have a lot going on this summer, Raphielle. Now, they're still in need of a head coach. Maybe LeBron pulls a little Bill Russell, gets in there, coaches and plays. Only way LA keeps him. Nah, yeah, I agree. But what does Los Angeles do this offseason, and who are the guys returning that could be fantasy prospects?
I think first and foremost, if they're going to take any player input on who they should hire, it needs to be more about Anthony Davis than LeBron James. I'm not the first to say this. I'm sure I won't be the last either, but he's the one that ever since they won that title in the bubble, everybody was talking about, well, the Lakers need to build towards Anthony Davis being the front-facing figure. Whether or not he's capable of doing that, I don't know, but they paid a lot to get him via trade. So I think it's time to figure that out. Then some of the names put out there, I like Sam Cassell. I feel like he's not going to take any nonsense from those guys. Like, obviously, Darvin Ham wasn't going to either, but I don't know what they're doing there, to be honest with you. Like, it feels like the on-court product is a win-now proposition, yet they do things like draft Jalen Hood-Schifino when Jaime Jaquez Jr. is still on the board. So I don't know if they're going to they rebuild, because they've given up a lot of draft capital over the years, so that's going to be difficult to do, but they've got that $51 million question that is LeBron James' player option that they need to figure out as well. I think for their sake, you kind of hope you get clarity on that early on, because regardless of who you hire as coach, you need to figure out what's going to happen there. Are you going to make another run with LeBron and AD, or is he going to leave and then you try to figure some things out around AD?
Yeah, if LeBron James leaves LA, certainly that Lakers team is going to be very, very interesting to see how they put together the roster, Dan. What do you think happens with Los Angeles this offseason, and who are you looking at as potential fantasy draft prospects next year?
For the Lakers draft prospects?
Yeah, fantasy.
Yeah.
Oh, fantasy.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I'm about to say, man, I'm not even what number
I
are
wouldn't
they
do
in
that
the
to you,
list?
Dan. I wouldn't do that to you.
I don't even know if they're
Bronny be the
I'm about to say, I
short
wondered
answer.
if they even. I was looking down the list. I was like,
they're 17. They're
Okay.
17, but New Orleans could take it. But I think New Orleans, it feels like they're going to take 2025 instead, just because that appears on paper to be the stronger draft class.
Right. So. That makes sense. For the coaching wise, like as Raph said, like, I mean, I feel like Sam Cassell fits the bill the most in terms of experience, head coaching experience, culture development. Like, I feel like he's always been around a winning culture and has a good relationship with players. The dark horse obviously is JJ Redick, but I don't know. I don't know if this is like the tinfoil hat thing where, you know, he started this Mind the Game podcast to showcase his ability to do X's and O's and all that. I think JJ Redick's probably going to stay on the media side of things. Like, why would you ever want that to be your first job? Yeah. Darvin Ham learned that the hard way. So, yeah, I would be hard-pressed to think it's going to be JJ Redick, but I don't know. Weirder things have happened in the NBA, and it's not like, you know, we haven't taken a former player to be a head coach very quickly, and it's worked out for some. Steve Kerr, Jason Kidd, et cetera. Steve Nash didn't really work out for him, but I was going to say, yeah. In terms of drafts next year, I don't know. I think this all hinges on LeBron's decision. Is he going to run it back or not? If he's not, you know, that's going to open up a lot of opportunity usage for other players. I don't know what they're going to do with D'Angelo Russell. It doesn't sound like they're – I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they're shopping him this offseason, right? But I also don't know what he's going to net.
He has a player option, and I kind of feel like they're probably hoping that he opts out.
Yeah, he's not out.
If I was him, I probably would.
The option is for 18.7. Yeah.
He could probably, he should be able to get more than 20 on the open market.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, I think that if I was D'Lo, I would choose to opt out of that contract for sure and set myself up with a better situation, whether I get more minutes or just more shots.
So if that happens, I mean, Austin Reeves looks intriguing.
Yeah.
Obviously Anthony Davis, but Anthony Davis without LeBron, I don't know that I want that version of Anthony Davis. That sounds like a lot of games played, missed, or DNPs.
That's true.
I don't know. This Lakers team's just in an interesting spot. I guess the good thing is time is on their side. There's only like one coaching vacancy available right now, and that's in Washington. With their rebuild situation, like no highly coveted coach is going to go to Washington. So we'll see what happens here. But I think that the Lakers would be wise to take a coach with some head coaching experience, or at least, you know, been an assistant in the league for quite some time and well respected amongst his peers.
Yeah, they seem to be in a stranglehold, man, with LeBron James right now, and it kind of sucks having, you know, you can't put your eggs in any baskets until you figure out what this particular person is doing. So this could be a long offseason for LA. But you mentioned Washington; they had the number 2 overall pick. It's going to be intriguing to see how they start their rebuild. Another team that we've talked about a lot this season, but for the last time, we will mention this team, is the Charlotte Hornets. They hired Celtics assistant Charles Lee. We're big Brandon Miller fans here on this podcast. They're a team that has the 6th overall pick and can go in a lot of directions, Raphielle. So, one, where does Brandon Miller get drafted next year? Where do you have him going? And what are your fancy thoughts on the Charlotte Hornets?
Yeah, I think in terms of Miller, it's about figuring out, because I didn't have him. I had him like a top 150 player coming into this season. Pretty sure you outperformed that. I just don't know how high I'd go in the top 100, just because we need to know what happens with LaMelo Ball for one. In terms of his injuries, they're kind of in a corner with him. Like, they paid him that extension, and rightfully so, but the flexibility really isn't there. And it's like, okay, is he going to suffer another ankle injury and miss 6 to 8 weeks, which kind of sets back the whole process again? But I think it seems pretty easy to see that Miller's going to be the guy they build around. You know, obviously you have the Mark Williams question as well. So I think Miller, I'd probably consider like top 75 or so. That may be a bit conservative, but I think that's about where I would go with him. But LaMelo Ball, Mark Williams, those are the 2 big question marks I have with this group regarding fantasy value for next season.
Yeah, I like those 2 players in particular to build around. I think LaMelo, his injury, if he's not as a part of Charlotte for a little bit next year, or trade target, whatever you may be, Brandon Miller, that's your time, baby. And I hope that he does have a big season. But I would probably slate him. Not that I'm the fantasy expert that you two are by any means, but I would figure between 75 and 100 is probably where his preseason rank would be with the upside that he brings with his scoring. Dan, where do you slate Brandon Miller and ADP? And anybody else make your list of potential targets next year in Charlotte?
I'm trying to look in our latest early mock where Brandon Miller went. Has he gone, Raph?
It's a good question.
I
assume that he has.
I figured he would too, but I'm not. Maybe I just missed his name a few times. Oh no, he went 5th round.
Yeah,
that's a high price. I don't know that I'm going. I don't know that I'm going that here. That's a top 60 player in 12-team formats. That's rich, but I think round 7 feels right to me. Which that's a top 100 player easily. So. Yeah, I think I could get around round 7, round 8 for Brandon Miller. I think that's fair. In terms of what Charlotte could be next year, the draft is going to be really important for them. They did invest, in Mark Williams, but he wasn't able to stay healthy. Hopefully, I haven't heard any updates. I don't know if you guys have on his back, but hopefully he's back. But if he's not, I think that they need to probably draft Donovan Clingan.
Yeah,
I think
UConn.
Yeah, I think he would probably be a good fit just to kind of shore up that front court. Based on the roster construction, like Brandon Miller, he's good. I think Miles Bridges is he's still under contract.
He's a free agent. He will be an unrestricted.
Is he unrestricted?
Yes.
Oh snap. Okay. I still feel like that still might be a good fit just for the insurance of their front court. Like you don't need help in the backcourt. Like you're pretty much covered there with LaMelo, assuming he could stay healthy. Who else did they brought in? Vasily Micic, Trey Mann was pretty good. I doubt that they have Nick Smith, who they still probably need to get more minutes and opportunity to. This team isn't going to be good next year. So I think at this point, you're just drafting for the best player available that has probably the best upside, which I think would probably be Clingan at this point. But I don't know. If Mark Williams is healthy, maybe go a different direction. If you decide not to re-sign Miles Bridges, who I think was rumored to go to possibly Detroit, but I think Tobias Harris was also rumored to go there too. Who really cares? Detroit sucks until they get rid of Monty Williams and Troy Weaver. That team is going nowhere. Charlotte's going to be bad. So at this point, you're just hoping that LaMelo Ball can stay healthy. I think one other thing I want to note is that in this draft, I thought it was pretty interesting that LaMelo Ball went 3rd round when this guy's been a consensus, back end 1st round pick over the last 2 seasons. He could end up being a Kawhi Leonard type player if he can stay healthy. How Kawhi was this year, 3rd round value that played at a 1st round value this season when he stayed healthy. So it's all on LaMelo's ankles, but I think he could actually be a steal for fantasy managers if this continues to be the trend going into next season.
Yeah, that's a good call too. I like the comparison there to Kawhi Leonard's fantasy status of this season. I think that's very relevant. And just double back on Donovan Clingan and the draft in general. A lot of this, it's mock draft season. So there's a lot out there, but a lot of people think that Clingan, Dalton Connect out of Tennessee, or Stephon Castle out of UConn will be selections for the Charlotte Hornets at 6. And I could see one of those 3 options definitely being happening for them. I'm hoping Terrence Shannon goes to the Bulls at 11. I had assumed we already got success with Illinois guards, so come on, bring another score, baby. We don't want to see Alex Caruso shooting threes anymore. All right,
that would also probably work well with they trade Zach LaVine too, right? Like that's a foregone conclusion that he's out of there.
Send him to Charlotte or Detroit. Send Lonzo Ball and Zach LaVine to Charlotte. Go let him hang out.
Lonzo's running again, man. He's got a whole podcast. Like he's feeling himself. Yeah,
things are going. He should have been podcasting 2 years ago. He would have made little extra money on the side. But as a Bulls fan, let's not talk about Lonzo Ball any longer. This Sunday is special for Raphielle and company. If you guys didn't know, it's a championship Sunday. Remember, Manchester City eyes an unprecedented 4th consecutive title. And Arsenal aims to finish atop the table for the first time in 20 years. You can find out who is crowned this weekend on a network of NBC Universal. It's NBC, USA, Peacock, and more. You can see on that graphic there. Raphielle, any thoughts on Championship Sunday? You're a big soccer guy now.
Well, I watched the Prem, but my favorite team plays in Italy, so it doesn't really. I think, yeah, but Man City winning yesterday. I think as long as they don't trip over their own feet, it's pretty much done. So I expect them to win a 4th straight title. But hey, I hope everyone has fun.
That's the goal of every sporting event, right? We just want everyone to have fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about some fantasy options for next season. Before we get out of here, we got 10 minutes. And Dan, I'll start with you because you were just talking about Kawhi Leonard and his fantasy status being a 3rd round value this year, but 1st round when he does play. What is your thoughts on the Clippers? Because not only is Kawhi's out there for this offseason, James Harden's another guy. I mean, you could spend time on Russell Westbrook and these guys if they stick around. But what are your thoughts?
Tell you what, man, the Pacific Division is a mess. And, the Clippers, I mean, Kawhi Leonard's definitely the only one that's really locked in there. It looks like, Paul George is a player option. He's probably going to opt out. He can definitely get more money in the open market. James Harden's an unrestricted free agent. I think the only 2 people that are actually under contract of fantasy relevancy are Kawhi and Norman Powell. Because Zubac is too. Yeah. Zubac is too. So this team could look dramatically different next season too. And, Ballmer's moving into the new arena. You're probably going to want to make a big splash for the season ticket holders and all of that to kind of get into the Clippers hype. So I don't know, maybe Paul George decides to stay, but I mean, there's been rumors of him potentially going to the Sixers or being lured by the Sixers. He's a really good player. He's an all NBA guy when he's healthy. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's going to have some suitors on the open market. I think Kawhi Leonard's safe, but like everyone else is kind of a hit or miss. Like Russell Westbrook's got a decision to make. This team could look way different next season. So I'll refrain from making too many predictions on what this team could look like from a fantasy perspective. But like for now, at least, Kawhi Leonard's going to be pretty solid that he's going to be the main cog that's definitely going to be there next season. I wouldn't be surprised if James Harden re-signed, to be honest, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't think LA should roll with anything similar to what they did this season. I know they had success in the first half of the year, but they need to find what's going to work for them moving forward. It's been a constant rotational door in LA when it comes to star players, in my opinion, or role players. Raphielle, what's your thoughts on the Clippers? Do you like what they could do this offseason, or are you just ready for them to look completely new?
It's always going to come down to health with these guys. I think Kawhi, his fantasy value should receive a boost because he largely stayed healthy this year. I think he'll be back to where we expect him to be in terms of, I don't know about a 1st round pick, but I think a 2nd rounder would probably be fair for him in terms of where to draft him in standard league drafts. As Dan noted, Paul George with the player option, that's going to be interesting to watch. Does he go into the open market for like that final payday? Because he's 34, so I don't think he's going to get this may be his last shot as a huge payday, depending on the situation. Harden being a free agent, given what the Clippers gave up to get him, I think he may be the priority to sign, especially with questions at the point guard position beyond him. So I think in terms of fantasy, you're looking at Kawhi, and then Zubac is probably like that towards the top 100. But nothing really like huge there because he's not someone that's going to jump off the page in terms of fantasy value, but he's going to be consistent. So I think those 2 guys are pretty much the ones I'd be focused on. Norman Powell, I think his value is as a streamer when they aren't healthy because consistency, it's been difficult for him to establish that when he's coming off the bench. So, yeah.
Yeah, I will pass on Zubac in fantasy next season with all due respect to you, gentlemen. But I do think that they don't have many options, especially when it comes to rebounding. So his role could be increased just because they have no options. Or a guy like Jonas Valanciunas might be ended up on the Clippers next season because I mean, I'm just throwing out hot takes here, some randomness. Don't mind me. But New Orleans. As always, a topic of conversation on this podcast because we talk about Brandon Ingram We talked about them 2 weeks ago because they were still playing, and we thought that, their days are numbered as a team. Ingram will likely be out the door. No idea if they're going to build around Zion or not. Of course, CJ McCollum had a rough postseason. Raphael, Trey Murphy time. What else in New Orleans is going on for next season? What can we know is returning in New Orleans? Is it or not Brandon Ingram?
Yeah, I think they made it clear they're going to build around Zion just because of the extension they gave him. But they did add in some protections on their end in terms of like games played and stuff like that. I'm not sure if there are any like physical fitness stipulations in the deal, but I wouldn't be shocked if there were, given the issues he's had in the past. But I think they're going to build around him. You still have Trey Murphy on a good contract. They re-signed Herb Jones, who continues to improve by the year. They need to see what they have in Jordan Hawkins, for one, and you still have Dyson Daniels. I think if you're going to move someone, it has to be Ingram just because of his contract. I think that's going to be the easiest thing for them to move. And you can't continue to go into games with he and Zion Williamson as your top two guys because neither one has shown the ability to stay healthy at the level they need them to. So, and Ingram looked absolutely poor in that sweep against the Thunder. So I think he's going to be the one who goes because, financially, maybe you'll get the most back for him. And they need those other guys. So I think he's going to be the one that I would be shocked if he was on that roster when training camp begins.
Yeah, I still think there's 20 million or so out there for Brandon Ingram if he wants to test the market. Definitely think someone would pay that for his services, and when healthy, he's a 20 points per game type of guy. But that restrictions in his health in the postseason down the stretch certainly did not look pleasant for a payday for him compared to a guy like D'Lo, who certainly upped the price entering this offseason.
He's getting 36 next year.
36. Yeah, I'm not paying Brandon Ingram $36 million. Like I said,
David Griffin,
more like 20, 25 million. Dan, what are your thoughts on New Orleans and their offseason? Do you think Ingram's days are numbered, and who are you building around with Zion, obviously?
Yeah, I think it's the foregone conclusion that Ingram's probably going to be traded. That's his name is the hottest on the market in terms of them choosing between players. I think it's interesting that Valanciunas is an unrestricted free agent. It seems like there's some positive conversation around potentially bringing him back because if you look at their front court, Willie Hernan-Gomez is also a free agent. Larry Nance is more of like a power forward than
he's still in the league.
Yeah,
I thought Willie was done.
No, he's listed on their roster still. I mean, he's still on the cap hold at least.
Yeah, I think he might be done though.
Did he retire or is he playing he's playing overseas somewhere?
Let's see. I'm pretty sure he's playing. Yeah, he's playing for FC Barcelona. So yeah.
Oh yeah, he out. So Cody Zeller, I guess, would be their backup center. Who's also an unrestricted free agent. So, yeah, long story short, they have nobody playing center on this team anymore. So they're going to have to free up some cap space. And I feel like trading Brandon Ingram and his $36 million definitely helps them do that. So they can probably try to find a more affordable, backup solution if they decide not to bring back Jonas Valanciunas, who I wouldn't expect would command too much on the open market, but I don't know. He's a really good rebounder, and they need that. So I think that they would prioritize getting him versus maybe some other bigs that may be out in the market. But it's obviously a priority of David Griffin to get Trey Murphy more minutes, and he's on a team-friendly deal right now. He's owed $5 million next year, but they're going to have to re-sign him for more. So you got to clear up the money while you still can now because he's going to cost definitely a lot more going into next season.
Yeah, certainly agree with that too. Wanted to talk about the Orlando Magic with you, Raphael, specifically because I know we were talking about them a lot, and we thought that they could get that upset in that series, but they took it to Game 7. What do you think they're going to do this offseason? We joked around with Klay Thompson, maybe a Brandon Ingram guy as another guy that could add to the fuel, the fire for Orlando Magic, but they have a lot of young pieces there in Orlando.
Yeah, I think the point guard position is what they clearly need to upgrade. You've got Markelle Fultz as a free agent. I think Jalen Suggs has done enough to feel confident in building with him. and as part of that backcourt. They need shooting and they need a playmaker. So I think those are the two areas that they're going to have to address. Between Fultz and Gary Harris, letting those guys leave would free up about $45 million. Now, obviously, those are cap holds right now, so they'd have to either renounce or find someone, or those two guys to find deals beforehand. But I think those are two obvious names to move on from. Chuma Okeke is going to come off the books too. He'll be a restricted free agent. I don't think Orlando, unless it's an extremely team-friendly deal, would look to match. So they're going to have some money to play with here, and they've got some talented pieces to build with. You talk about Banchero, Franz Wagner. How much should we believe in Jonathan Isaac? I think that's going to be the one question, whether we're talking real basketball or fantasy, and going into next season.
Yeah, I like where Orlando's headed. I think they have a lot of interesting pieces. All the guys that you have mentioned, Banchero, Franz Wagner. I like Jonathan Isaac too. He's got a strap, as we say, and I think that he could be a nice piece off the bench if they decide to keep him. But Dan, where do your opinions differ, or are they align with Raphael's?
No, I think I'm aligned with Raph. That they got to get shooting. They got to prioritize that, especially for their struggles in the playoffs. But then to offset also Paolo and Franz, I think they just use a little help on the perimeter there. But then also like the point guard is like the biggest question mark for me is like they drafted Anthony Black last year. So is he ready to go? Like, do you need to actually invest it in the open market? Do you trade for a person like, I don't know, Anthony Simons, who wants to win now? And clearly the Portland Trailblazers aren't in a place to do that. Do you start calling the Hawks potentially for one of their point guards? So there's a few different ways that they could go. But I think that, to your point, Vaughn, like I think that their outlook looks really promising just because they have their two all-stars already, build out a couple of, foundational pieces around them. And, you could be looking at a perennial playoff contender that's young, and all on pretty team-friendly deals right now because of their age. So you're not really having to spend too much to really build around this core young unit here.
Yeah, I miss the Orlando Magic days of Dwight Howard, Rashard Lewis, Hito Turkoglu. Let's bring back those winning days, baby. Yeah, he was one of the most underrated 2K players out there. I was 3-point contest, give me Hito Turkoglu, baby. But all right, we got two things to talk about before we get out of here. Quickly, Philadelphia's fantasy outlook, Dan. I'll start with you, obviously. That's the squad. Tyrese Maxey's a restricted free agent. Very big deal. What do you expect to happen with Maxey this offseason and Philly moving forward?
Yeah, he's getting paid a lot of money. So, yeah, I think from a fantasy perspective, this team has a lot of cap flexibility. It's only Paul Reed, Embiid, and Maxey that are pretty much on the books that have fantasy relevancy. So there are rumors that Kelly Oubre might be brought back. That I think that Daryl Morey was very impressed for what he contributed to the team. But Buddy Hield, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to re-sign him. I don't know if it makes sense to, given how many minutes he wasn't played in the postseason. This team's going to look a lot different, similar to the Clippers. So, I think in terms of we're talking fantasy, Embiid's probably going to be like a 5th to like 7th pick in the drafts, in most drafts, I feel like, just because of his injury risk. He was a top 3 dude, but hey, Victor Wembanyama's here, so everyone's got to move down. And then Tyrese Maxey, I think it's fair to have him as a early second round pick, early second round pick next year.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable taking him there. Raphael, same thing. Tyrese Maxey, second round pick for you entering next year.
Yeah, he's no worse than a top 20 pick. I think there was a lot of people thought that he would break out this season, but I think there was still a little bit of more conservative take, to how to evaluate him going into drafts ahead of this season. That's not going to be the case next year. So I agree with Dan. That's pretty much going to be it until we see what that full roster looks like. I think Oubre probably be like a late round guy if he were to return, but between Tobias Harris and Buddy Hield, that's going to free up like $70 million, I think, if those guys move on, which I think from a financial standpoint, you kind of expect that to be the case. So you just see what that roster looks like. You add a third star and then put pieces around he and Embiid and Maxey, and then you probably have a contender on your hands there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we hope. So we have to trust the process. Isn't that right, Dan? Hopefully it does work out, getting a couple other pieces there. But I would like to hear, names like Paul George, like that added to the Philadelphia roster next year. And you two have been working very hard through the postseason. So before we get out of here, Dan, I know you worked on an article talking a lot about point guards. Give us one or two that's poised to break out for next season. And Raphielle, while he's talking, get your brain ready for any articles you've been working on, anything you want to throw out there for the people.
Yeah, so my breakouts from this season were Kobe White, Emmanuel Quickley, and Tyus Jones. And I feel the most excited about Emmanuel Quickley out of that group of three. He averaged over 17 points, 6 assists as a member of the Raptors. And I think that that's something that we'll see going into next season. He played well with Scotty Barnes in the 25 games that they played with each other. So I think he is the point guard of the future there. And in that offensively unselfish system, I think he's going to thrive. So really excited about Emmanuel Quickley. I think he should be probably where Brandon Miller went in that 5th, 6th round. I'd be more interested in picking someone like Emmanuel Quickley there.
Yeah, love IQ and his upside there. Toronto's going to be an interesting team next year after calling it quits second half of the season. Raphielle, what are you working on NBC, and what will you be doing moving forward next few weeks?
Yeah, well, right now we've started our process of going team by team in terms of like fantasy recaps. With myself, Zach Hanshu, and Noah Rubin. We're working in reverse order. So the teams that were really bad this year, they're the ones we're getting out of the way first. So seeing Detroit, Washington, and Portland written up. I get to throw my hat in the ring next week with Brooklyn and Toronto. So that'll give us a good 6-week run of content up until about the draft. And I'm sure we'll have some other things, cooking up as well.
That Portland one, that's going to be a must-read for me because knowing how many rookies and youngins they got on that one, I want to see what was written on that end. So thank you guys for all your hard work. I will be enjoying my week in Cancun this Saturday. So TJ McConnell, nice. I'll be seeing you soon, my guy. Bring the Prada. For Raphielle Johnson, the Knicks fan, Dan Titus, the Sixers fan, and Vaughn Dalzell, the fan of a team that will never be in the playoffs. We will see you guys in 2 weeks talking NBA Finals. Can't wait to see Celtics versus Nuggets. Maybe.